For weeks, the Germans suffered heavy casualties as the ever-charging horde of Soviet soldiers pushed them back towards the west. The Germans were low on supplies and reinforcements, but several regiments merged at the top of a hill in the forest to form a group with significant stopping power. Though it was in no doubt enough to stop Stalin's march, it definitely had the opportunity to stall the Soviets for a while. As the number of soldiers at the hill were too high to do a retreat by foot, it was decided to evacuate in the vehicles available to the nearest checkpoint several miles ahead. The Germans would need time and had set up defenses on the hill, using their armor as artillery. From the forest the Reds emerged with numbers that never ceased. As they were nearing the base of the hill, the order to charge was given. Head-on charges were nothing new for the Russian soldiers, and as many other battles fought, victory would be paid with the blood of many of their own. Supported by tanks to boost combat power and morale, the first shots were made at the German armor, standing fast and holding position. The mighty Tiger took out its first prey in response. As the Russians headed into the open, many were mowed down by German machine guns. But the Russians always had more soldiers to spare, as they charged in hordes towards the hill. Being on top of the hill meant great oversight for the German armor, making their reach all the more deadly. At the other side, the first transports were loaded up and leaving the area as the ground trembled by the ongoing battle. To add more effectiveness to their defense, the Germans rallied up terrifying Panzerwerfer. Their barrage of rockets and loud noises struck fear into the hearts of the enemy, destroying anything in its wake. The Russians still tried to advance with infantry and armor, but were forced to a halt at the open road. Rapid fire from the infantry in the trenches proved to be effective as the Soviets lacked any sort of cover. Those that did reach the hill did not get far on it. Another transport was good to go. The Germans only needed a little more time before the evacuation was complete. The Russians suffered immensely, but their great number did not diminish. More tanks approached, but had difficulties trying to hit the targets from this angle. The thick vegetation made movement of the tanks slow, making them easy targets. When a track was damaged, the armor was used as cover, but some had to pay with their lives for this decision, as a second strike sent the machine and its men ablaze. The Tigers proved their earned reputation, stopping the tanks one after another and illuminating the cold winter landscape. The Panzerwerfers delivered another devastating blow, as many soldiers had reached the road, only to be cleansed of their life by a rain of rockets. Once the smoke cleared up, the horrifying sight of carnage was on display, as blood and body parts were scattered all over the place. It demoralized the troops, but there were more incoming. The next wave of soldiers showed themselves from within the forested area, being greeted by mortar and machine gun fire. Tanks that were crossing the road were often taken out, but one managed to reach the base of the hill, finding itself at an angle impossible to do any significant damage. As it drove around, it saw an opportunity to take out some of the outer German trenches. The infantry got shredded as they ducked for cover. The Germans made the drastic decision to use a Panzerwerfer to take out the tank. The inaccuracy and proximity of the attack meant that though the tank was successfully destroyed, many Germans were killed in the process. Back at the roads, the Russians were crawling through the guts of their fallen comrades. Charge after charge were stopped, making the road an uneven hurdle of piles of human flesh and deep craters. The final German transports were loaded up and had left the area. With a new wave of Soviets coming in, this meant that now the Germans had to get the defending infantry out of there. The smoke and fallen down trees made it difficult for the Germans to acquire targets, but the Russians nevertheless took losses as they approached the hill at a lower pace. The men were exhausted and low on morale. Some still managed to reach the hill, but ended up being slaughtered like the rest, as the area was scarred by bombardments and artillery strikes. A final salvo of the Panzerwerfers deeper into the forest area halted the Russians long enough to where the German higher-ups felt confident enough to evacuate the troops stationed on the hill. The Russians bled this day, but they would endure, for Stalin always had more troops marching forward. The signal was given and the infantry abandoned their posts and ran to the other side of the hill. Their casualties were much lower, and the remaining mortars and artillery provided cover for the escape. More Russians were approaching, but the Germans had managed to complete the evacuation and send the troops to the checkpoint where the two opposing armies would once again stand face to face.